Sometimes it actually rolls some pretty good options and removal spells. I mean, Salamander and Blazing Breath alone have been very fantastic spells.
Right, yeah, they do. Yep.
On the side of Dragoncraft, so we'll see. And it looks like Dragon is banned on
both
Dragon
ends. Banned. All right.
I'm ready for this.
That's
Back to the
way
real
should
world,
be,
it seems.
clearly. I think that's the safest ban they can both go for. So here we go. A mid shadow versus dirt rune. I think this is our mid range, less burn dirt rune. Yep.
All right. I feel like this one is prepared for matchups like this. There's a lot of answers to things. Oh, well, at the very least, there's a lot of answers in dirt, especially to the way that mid shadow plays. There's a lot of ways to deny shadows. There's a lot of ways to deny last words. So usually I would think that this is on the side of fantasy.
Right, this does seem like a dirt deck that gives up some of its reach and burn for answers to mid-range decks, which this definitely is from Whael. In mid-range Shadow, you know, I don't think I see this on ladder very much, but this is kind of making a comeback in tournaments as an answer to mid-range Sword. What do you think? Do you think this matchup is, I think you said, is in Fantasy's favor for you?
I think the one glaring weakness of mid Shadow is that its boards are small, and they rely on being sticky. And so when you're in a situation where the matchup is a deck that really just doesn't care about stickiness at all, or just doesn't let you get any kind of value, and I think that that's just absolute torture for mid Shadow.
Right. I think I would agree completely. You know, as far as that goes, he even has kind of the we've made this comparison back in TOTG, I think it was. Magical Illusionist is kind of funny, you know, in the sense against Shadow, because it's a very sticky follower in itself, right?
It's Shadow kind of card, actually.
Yeah, it very does feel like Shadow, and you can even summon zombies later with Professor of Taboos. So.
It's such a hard or difficult card to deal with. It already resummons itself twice, which deals with effectively anything that Whael can play with in the next few turns. Trying to get tempo against dirt, I think, is very important, but just doing it is so difficult, especially for Shadow.
Right, it definitely feels close to impossible, as he's forced to use a zombie party on a 2-2 here. And this Magical Illusionist is not going anywhere anytime soon. Even though Whael can evolve first, it's another one established for Fantasy. Oh gosh.
Well, I see a little bit of a disadvantage to Magic Illusionist sometimes, and that's that this could burn Fantasy straight out of his Earth Sigils very, very quickly. Magic Illusionist can be used against the opponent in this way, and I could really bite Fantasy later on, but it still does force Whael to commit a lot of attacks into them, at any rate, for very little on his side.
That is true, right? Fantasy will draw a card when that Witch's Cauldron finally cycles itself, but he only has 3 cards in hand, and 2 of them are Levi's, so not exactly fitting the game plan of his deck. He wants these, like, 6 play point comeback cards like Master Mage Levi, or even Professor of Taboos, or Calamitous Curse to come back for him, since he is not teched to have the kind of reach that these Burn Dirt decks usually do. That said, he does have Whael at 9 if he casts this Frames and Sorcery, so to be fair.
And with another Levi in hand, I guess even throwing himself down to very few cards left would be worth it if it's just enough pressure that Whael can't deal with. There's a limited number of ways that Whael can actually clear the remainders of these Magic Illusionists.
That is true. It looks like he does just save the Crimson Sorcery. Whael finds a Demon Eater, but I'm not sure how useful that is. Whael kind of wants to get the Shadows available for Death's Breath, I would imagine. Even though it does kind of get absolutely wrecked by, you know, younger Levi. That isn't available for Fantasy yet, so.
Looks like he goes for the Dark Blade Fiend, which throws away some of those shadows. He's not going to have it on curve next turn by doing this, but it does protect him for the time being from taking any further combat damage.
Right, this is gonna, on the end of the turn, trigger, and it will cycle that Cauldron for Fantasy, but it also removes all the Earth Sigils off the board, so he doesn't have these options that he did before. Master Mage Levi could come down, but it wouldn't do anything to the board itself. And a Halo Golem seen drawn that's already kind of punishing Fantasy in the sense that he has no Earth Rights, even though he does now have this, Red Hot Ritual, that's the name of it, I couldn't think of it.
The Red Hot Ritual is really fortunate to have as well in that it just sets him up for this perfect amount of damage to clear.
Oh
that
my
ward
gosh.
easily.
Fantasy throwing in Levi there. And then trading in. He's going to actually set up lethal with Halo Golem next turn. So no matter what happens, if Whael doesn't kill this Earthright. Again, this is kind of exactly what you just said, though. You know, Fantasy does have lethal in hand if one of these magic illusions doesn't die, right?
I imagine
think
Whael
it
is
will
completely
happen.
aware of this too.
Yeah, right. Whael has to be aware of this, 100%. Master Mage Levi could be used to just push the damage anyway, but even still, no ward can be played, and these things are going to live. So, that is just game, I think. Either way.
I think Whael played to draw there in order to figure something out, but he knew he couldn't use his Death's Breath. He had already decided to commit those shadows the previous turn. So perhaps he was just looking for something else, like a zombie party to take one out, use an Evo party.
Right, zombie party or lurching corpse would have been great options there, but he just doesn't. He can't answer the illusionists. They're just too sticky, and he just dies to illusionists. Oh my gosh.
Looking kind of like 2-2 Fortes here in Wales, the luck Wales had so far with answering certain followers.
That is highly unfortunate for him. And again, kind of funny that Shadow dies to a follower that is such a sticky follower, right? Like you would expect Shadow to be the one to take advantage of that, but he does go down to the Magic Illusionist. Man, that's a pretty quick win for Rune there.
He just lost that one to aggression as well. He didn't lose it to the way that Dirt will usually just grind out that matchup. Really, Fanta just attacked him, burned him with the Levi's, and that was enough. Well, just simply couldn't deal with it.
Turns out Levi does a lot of damage.
So next up was Fantasy's mostly aggro with this tiny touch of a mid-range threat list. I think it's the same thing. I'd like to see this work out for Whael. It seems he's determined this time to just try to get the win with Shadow first.
I think he's got a fairly okay-ish matchup for this, especially considering that Fantasy is stuck going second. That's a pretty big deal usually for these aggro decks. And also Whael going first, he has a 1-2-3 play. Lurching Corpse not incredible until he can sacrifice it, but once he's on the board, he can stay there. So.
Plethora of 1-drops. I think Fantasy's hand would develop a lot more if he could try to push Whael off if he found a Princess Vanguard or something like that, but still has the option to play 2 1-drops next turn.
Whael actually draws into a Demon Eater, which is access to removal for his own Lurching Corpse, which in turn, wow, Palace Fencer drawn, will remove a follower off of Fantasy's board, but that's pushing 2-face. Never mind, trades, wow.
Yeah, I suppose he trades because he understands the Lurching Corpse isn't going to be able to attack, so perhaps I see a lot of people commit to this philosophy where if they're playing Aggro Sword and they go second, then they don't continue to try to play aggro, they just simply take the trades whenever they can.
That is true. Lurching Corpse can't go for a value trade here, unfortunately. It would be incredible. You have to really feel that effect. Demon Eater play seems fairly obvious. I also like how this is actually a mid-range Shadow deck. It's not an Atomy list, and he's running the Deathly Tyrants, right? Which is something we normally see in these Atomy decks.
Maybe in playtesting he just figures he gets the shadows. I see the Deathly Tyrant and I just assume it fits there at this point, and then you mentioning that just made me question it.
I doubt we will see a double trade here, and we might see a trade on the Novice Trooper. Okay, so Whael's not able to evolve, but it looks like Fantasy just goes for 2 to 4 face damage.
I think it's smart to go face that time just because it's not like a case of a Lurching Corpse that now can't make trades, but if he made those trades it would work out the same way as though Whael had made them himself. So just decides to convert it to damage this time.
Exactly, and Fantasy's able to evolve this turn. Finds a Juliet. It's not amazing with his current hand though. Perseus kind of messing that up a bit, but he can trigger it this turn, so.
It's rare I actually see Perseus' effect triggered or making a big deal, and in fact he doesn't go for it. Just simply wants to send this first Evo point face.
And that's why it's rare, because you could just evolve and go face. Oh my gosh. So fortunately for Whale, he does have access to, he can clear 2 of the 1/1s and then evolve his Ceres here, which will get rid of the 4/4 and also heal him for 2.
I think the heal for 2 is massive here. I think that makes such a huge difference against the amount of damage that Fantasy has left. Assuming we don't see
This
a particular
seems interesting to me. Instead of killing the 1/1, it looks like he's going to make sure Ceres takes no damage, which I think I do like. It makes it much more awkward to get rid of her.
I love this play a lot, actually, because I don't see a way for Fantasy to...
Wow.
Oh, never mind.
Council of Card Knights, right on time.
I didn't see before that a way for him to deal with it, because his entire board was locked out of trading against the series, which Whale probably noticed.
I was gonna say, only Council of Card Knights and Swordcraft answer this, but with the Caster Curse being such a real thing, I didn't want to say that.
Seems like Council is just the go-to answer that just occurs, unlike...
it's a natural thing. It's just good. It always exists.
That's so much
Death's Breath,
pressure.
however, drawn on curve, very excellent for a Whale. That's great. Only a second Council of Card Knights will be a great answer here.
Very difficult for this to push through, and even then, doesn't have any perfect trades. Nothing clean, because these Perseuses just cannot make any clean damage happen here. Draws another Perseus. Well, now his effect I think is kind of relevant. It's the only value he can get out of an evolve.
It looks like we finally might, yes, see a Perseus evolve, which looks great.
Fortunately.
Gains a ward and +1 attack.
Now he has to decide whether to send this into the 4/4, which is the rest of his board would be quite injured to deal with, or try to get a value trade with it. Could make it awkward for how he expects Whale to deal with it.
I think realistically, value trade is the only option at this buffet. He doesn't have really anything else he can go for.
It's a little daunting to see the zombie party for the comeback Whale could easily have to something like this.
All right, even without zombie party, he has Thane available. He could just flood the board again.
A lot of options. He wants to do this. I'd imagine that he'd want to go for the zombie party here just because the Perseus having ward is a little bit obnoxious. Might not be the best use of the 4/4 now that Perseus has already value traded.
Right, zombie party does seem to be the more enticing option. He does go for that. It's trading the Skull Beast here even as well, and then pushing 4, I would imagine, to the face. No, even trading the Perseus away.
Imagine Whale going for that because I don't think he could see any way or how he could lose or develop any disadvantages through making trades like that. Just gonna take this one patiently. And to be honest, Fantasy having played the last card out of his hand, I don't really imagine there being many bomb drops that could threaten Whale again other than Albert or his single copy of Fangblade Slayer. Even Aluda's doesn't seem particularly impactful anymore here.
Right, Whale is going to look to just choke Fantasy of all options, even Soul converting into the White King here to put up a ward, and that's going to basically spell the end for Fantasy. We might even see a surrender here this turn.
Right. It's actually a combo I find really cool. Does 2 damage, sets up a massive ward, and Fantasy's deck is filled with very low value followers.
As is Aggro Sword. That's what Aggro Sword does. It plays very low value followers, but it plays them very fast. So now we're going to see an Aggro Sword matchup with, I do believe, Whale is. Whale's our combo forest player, I do believe.
Yeah, that's correct. That is correct. Something funny I noticed though in one last glance, Fantasy's list doesn't really play any methods of refill. I see sometimes Aggro Sword will still pick up the staircase in order to find its finishers, so we don't have anything like that here. If he gets grinded out and run out of resources, I think that's it.
Yeah, normally I think sometimes I've seen a few Aggro Swords kind of play staircase just to get that little bit back. But right, he kind of just has to play what he draws. We do see an Ephemera in Fantasy's hand. His curve looks pretty okay. I don't think he's going to choose to... Oh, never mind. A sort of Novice Trooper finds Council. Interesting.
Right, a little scary. Perhaps was going for Princess Vanguard were a really, really strong turn 2. I think one of the strongest turn 1 to turn 2 conversions in the game. But, especially drawing an Alvidas, that makes me a little nervous to see how Fantasy's early game's gonna go.
Right, Fantasy has to just basically top deck his curve at this point, and unfortunately for him, Whael has access to double Sylvan Justice.
Neither this Vanguard nor the Princess Juliet pose much of a threat of damage. I think even just a small series of exchanges like that can be devastating for Aggro Sword early on.
They do play a lot of Storm followers, but usually Ephemera conversions need to have followers that stick to get good Ephemera conversions, so kind of bad for Fantasy early on.
Yeah, finding the Ephemera into a really strong follow-up with Albert or Council could be a huge recovery of tempo, though.
Pixie Mischief would set Ephemera back to hand, but I'm not sure if he cares for doing that. Next turn he has Will of the Forest available, so he can just kill Ephemera anyway. And he does actually bounce the Ephemera. Okay, I like it. I like it.
I like this play a lot because having both Dance of Death, Will of the Forest, and Lilac in hand spells out that Whael could deal with anything, an Albert sent face or otherwise. Well, I suppose the amount of defense on Council of Card Knights does overshadow this a bit. But for the most part, it's a lot of confidence.
Council of Card Knights does have 9 defense on it, so...
Right. He hasn't even drawn enough cards at this point, or this early on in the game for Will of the Forest to actually even nearly reach that amount of damage.
Replaying Ephemera here doesn't seem very enticing. It would put 6 total health on the board, which would just get cleared by Will of the Forest. So I'm not sure how this turn gets played. The longer Ephemera sits in your hand, the longer an amazing card turns into a useless one. So he goes for Council instead. Okay, interesting. And evolves the Storm Follower even.
Now that's really interesting because Council is a very great purchase of tempo here, and this is a very difficult board for any class to deal with as it comes out on curve, especially when they go first. But at the same time, sometimes Council of Card Knights is your only answer to some things. I think you've made the greatest point of how anytime Sword's in trouble, they just need to evolve the Bane and that's it. But throwing it onto the board...
The Bane is a very get-out-of-free-jail card, for sure.
Throwing it out onto the board here, though, I suppose Whael doesn't deal with it immediately, but it does leave it a little bit more vulnerable for the turns where Whael might put out something larger. Perhaps reading his opponent is combo Forest, he's just thinking there might not be anything he needs it for, like that.
This does look like it's going to end up paying off for Fantasy, however, as he can just create a similarly difficult to deal with board with Alvidas this following turn.
While continuing to push damage the whole time.
Right. Which is important, clearly, yeah. Closer he gets to the 9 play point spike, he also has double Alberts waiting for him there, so this is looking pretty good for Fantasy.
Just noticing his entire hand, aside from the Ephemera, is actually just Storm, so not going to have any lack of damage if he just continues to push it every turn. So the Council seemed like a very worthy investment there.
Not to mention on 8 play points, he could just play Ephemera, Novice Trooper, and Quick Blader all on the same turn, and just kind of convert her at that point.
In fact, that would be a really nice transition in between allowing him to play Albert next turn, assuming that Whael could find a way to jam any of that damage coming up soon. We don't have a ward in his hand or anything like that.
Right, and this is looking pretty bad for Whael. He does find a Chrysalia Aaron, though, and that's pretty great, as Whael can also get rid of the Bane. It's going to likely result in Fantasy developing Ephemera and getting away with it, but I think Aaron is pretty good.
There doesn't seem to be any particular reason to go for Will of the Forest. Doesn't really have that much damage. He used his evolution point in order to recover himself a bit on the board here for sure.
Goes for Lilac instead. Interesting. Okay. So Lilac along with maybe Goblin Mage or even Roach on the Bane to get rid of the full board?
That is a possibility. I think what Whael may have seen there is that he knows there's one ephemera in Fantasy's hand, but otherwise may just simply feel safe at 8 defense remaining. So just wants to hold this Crystalia Aaron until the very last moment when he would need it, rather than set it up to be traded into by some other means.
Right, that does make a lot of sense, but Ephemera looks like it will be able to be developed. He also could just go for Novice Trooper into Taji Princess Vanguard to push for 4-face anyway. That doesn't quite set up lethal, though. I think Ephemera is going to be great here, yeah. It will die to Will of the Forest, though, we do know that.
But, well, I suppose in this case, Whael does just barely have... No, if he goes for Will of the Forest, I think Albert, the Taji, and the Princess Vanguard would be just enough. So it was actually the Aaron he had to go for in order to survive that.
Right, that is 8 play points and exact lethal. You are correct. Oh my gosh. And he goes for it.
I found holding the Aaron to be interesting, but I think it turns out just with the ephemera plays that you mentioned, just simply wasn't enough to mitigate all that damage.
I think realistically, you know, what are the chances Sword can come up with 5 damage? Pretty high if they've got 5 cards in their hand, to be honest.
Though I wonder if it isn't part of Whael's plan to think that he needs to play to win as much as possible, and he's just trying to hope that Fantasy can't find the extra 2 damage for turn 9.
Right, and you say 2 damage because 3 is very easy for most Sword followers to come up with, but 4 is awkward, so.
There it is. And yeah, that's actually a very good point. Sword classically has had a very hard time to hit 4. It usually takes multiple followers to be able to do that, but able to make the reach happen, and it looks like Fantasy will win that, move on to the Grand Finals, and is in Season 3. So we have that CPV representation now joining the North American